The Marble Plaza at Arlington Cemetery has witnessed many things, but what happened on October 15th was different. A young man's laughter echoed across sacred ground. A soldier's rifle gleamed in the autumn sun, and 24 hours later, #disrespectfulprince was trending in 17 countries. But here's what the cameras didn't capture. Here's what the millions of angry comments never revealed. The real story began not with the insult, but with what happened 3 days later, when the world wasn't watching, because sometimes the most powerful transformations happen in absolute silence. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The synchronized sound of military boots echoed across the Marble Plaza, then suddenly stopped. The world fell silent. Only the soft rustle of the American flag in the autumn breeze remained, casting shifting shadows across the tomb of the unknown soldier. Then came the sound that would shatter this sacred moment. A young man's laughter, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the reverent atmosphere like a blade. Prince Khalil bin Rashid, 25 years old, stood among the distinguished diplomatic delegation from the Middle East. His designer sunglasses reflected the afternoon sun as he whispered something in Arabic to his bodyguard, gesturing mockingly toward the motionless sentinel before them. The Instagram influencer with 2 million followers had found his next viral moment. His father, King Fahad, stood 10 feet away in a perfectly tailored black suit. The 60-year-old monarch's weathered face remained stoic, but those who knew him well could detect the slight tightening around his eyes. This was not the behavior he had raised his son to display on the world stage. The American ambassador shifted uncomfortably as international journalists raised their cameras. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. All the major networks were here to document what should have been a routine diplomatic courtesy visit. Instead, they were about to witness something far more controversial. Specialist Marcus Thompson, 22 years old, had been guarding the tomb for 8 months. His rifle, perfectly positioned, gleamed in the filtered sunlight. For him, this wasn't just a job or a ceremonial duty. This was sacred ground, where America's unknown heroes rested in eternal honor. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a tribute to the fallen. The delegation had arrived 30 minutes earlier for what was supposed to be a solemn 20-minute visit. Ambassador Richardson had carefully explained the significance of the changing of the guard, the meaning behind every precise movement, the weight of history that pressed down upon this hallowed ground. Prince Khalil had listened with visible boredom. "How long do we have to stand here watching this robot soldier?" he had asked his security chief in Arabic, loud enough for several people to hear. The translator, horrified, had softened the words considerably in her English interpretation, but the damage was already being done. In the crowd of onlookers, 70-year-old William Patterson, a Vietnam veteran who had lost his son in Afghanistan, felt his hands begin to tremble. Other veterans in the gathering crowd exchanged glances, their faces hardening with each disrespectful comment from the young prince. The first real warning sign came when Prince Khalil stepped across the yellow boundary rope. Security personnel immediately tensed, but the diplomatic protocols were clear. No international incidents, no matter what. The head of security whispered urgently into his radio, "Hold all positions. Repeat, hold all positions. No incidents today." Prince Khalil pulled out his phone, the latest iPhone model encased in gold and diamonds. He started taking selfies, making exaggerated poses while the solemn changing of the guard ceremony continued mere feet away. His social media manager, standing nearby, was already calculating the engagement numbers this content would generate. "This is so outdated," the prince commented in perfect English to one of the American officials, his voice carrying further than he intended. "Don't you think these old rituals are a bit much for the 21st century? Ambassador Richardson felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. 40 years of diplomatic experience had never prepared him for something quite like this. He could see the storm brewing in the faces of the American veterans present, the barely contained outrage of the military honor guard standing at attention nearby. The prince's bodyguards remained stone-faced, but internally they were cringing. They had witnessed their charges' behavior before, but never in such a sacred setting, never with such high stakes. One of them discreetly moved closer, hoping to provide some subtle guidance. But Prince Khalil was already moving toward his next target, the tomb itself. As Specialist Thompson continued his measured 21-step walk along the black mat, Prince Khalil began reading the inscription on the tomb aloud, his voice dripping with theatrical drama. "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God," he announced, as if performing for an audience. Several people in the crowd audibly gasped. William Patterson took a step forward, his weathered hands clenched into fists. The Instagram cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what was about to become one of the most controversial diplomatic incidents of the year. The stage was set, the players were in position, and Prince Khalil was about to cross a line that would change everything. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms worldwide. Prince Khalil, emboldened by what he perceived as an audience's attention, decided to escalate his performance. He opened his Instagram app and hit the live stream button. Within seconds, thousands of his followers were watching as he panned the camera across Arlington National Cemetery. "Guys, you won't believe how seriously Americans take these old traditions," he whispered into his phone, grinning widely. The notification ping echoed across the silent plaza. Several heads turned, including that of Specialist Thompson, though he maintained his rigid posture and continued his ceremonial walk. The prince's followers began flooding the live stream with laughing emojis and fire symbols, completely unaware of the sacred ground their entertainment was desecrating. "Look at this soldier," Prince Khalil continued his broadcast, zooming in on Marcus Thompson's face. "He's been walking back and forth for like 10 minutes. It's like watching paint dry, but with more guns." His voice carried clearly in the afternoon air, and the crowd began to murmur with growing disapproval. William Patterson had heard enough. The 70-year-old veteran stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion. "Son, you need to show some respect," he said, his words cutting through the prince's live stream. "This isn't entertainment. These are our heroes." Prince Khalil lowered his phone slightly and looked at the elderly man with amusement. "Respect for what exactly?" he replied, his voice loud enough for his live audience to hear. "Dead people who can't hear us. Come on, old man. Lighten up." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Several veterans began moving closer, their faces red with anger. Ambassador Richardson felt his diplomatic career flashing before his eyes as he watched the situation spiral completely out of control. But Prince Khalil wasn't finished. He turned back to his phone camera, his confidence reaching dangerous levels. "Americans are so dramatic about everything," he continued his commentary. "Watch this. I bet this robot soldier won't even react if I do this." That's when he made the decision that would define the rest of his life. Prince Khalil walked directly towards Specialist Thompson, who was completing his precise turn at the end of his route. The prince positioned himself next to the guard, raised his phone for a selfie, and then reached out with his free hand toward the barrel of Marcus's M14 rifle. Time seemed to freeze. Every camera in the area focused on this single moment. The crowd collectively held its breath. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Marcus Thompson felt the presence immediately. 8 months of training had prepared him for many scenarios, but not this one. He could not break protocol, could not abandon his post, could not speak or react in any way that would compromise the dignity of his sacred duty. Instead, he did exactly what his training dictated. As the prince's hand approached his weapon, Marcus took one measured step forward, his eyes fixed straight ahead. It was a movement so subtle, so perfectly within regulation, that most observers almost missed it, but Prince Khalil felt it immediately. The soldier's movement caused him to stumble slightly, his hand missing the rifle by mere inches. For just a moment, the cocky expression faltered on his face. He looked into Marcus's eyes and saw something there. Not anger, not fear, but absolute, unwavering determination. The live stream chat exploded with comments. Some followers were cheering, thinking this was all planned entertainment, but others, particularly American viewers who had found the stream, began expressing outrage in real time. The hashtag disrespectful prince started trending within minutes. Did you see that? Prince Khalil laughed nervously into his phone, trying to regain his composure. This guy actually thinks he's protecting something important. It's just a tomb, people, just stones and dead bodies. That final comment proved to be the breaking point. William Patterson pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "My son died in Afghanistan," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "He was 23 years old. This tomb represents every family who lost someone serving this country." The prince finally seemed to realize he had crossed a serious line. His live stream viewers were now splitting into two camps, those who found his behavior hilarious, and a rapidly growing number who were expressing genuine horror at his actions. King Fahad, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally moved. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he approached his son. "End the broadcast," he commanded in Arabic, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "But Dad, this is going viral," Prince Khalil protested, still not fully grasping the situation. "My engagement numbers are through the roof." Ambassador Richardson seized the moment to intervene. "Your Highness," he said, addressing the prince with barely concealed desperation. "Perhaps we should continue the tour? There are other sites to visit today." The damage, however, was already done. Prince Khalil's Instagram Live had been viewed by over 50,000 people in real time. Screen recordings were already being uploaded to Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The prince's casual dismissal of American military sacrifice was spreading across the internet at lightning speed. As the diplomatic delegation began to move away from the tomb, Prince Khalil couldn't resist one final post. He uploaded a photo of himself with the tomb in the background, adding the caption, "American soldiers take themselves way too seriously. Some people need to learn how to have fun." Within an hour, that single post would receive over 100,000 angry comments. Military families, veterans organizations, and ordinary Americans began sharing the content with expressions of outrage and disbelief. Meanwhile, Specialist Marcus Thompson continued his duty walk, his face revealing nothing of the turmoil he had just witnessed. But inside, he was already composing the incident report he would file as soon as his shift ended. Some lines, he knew, should never be crossed. The prince had no idea that his quest for social media fame had just triggered a diplomatic crisis that would reach the highest levels of both governments before the sunset. By evening, the digital wildfire had consumed the internet. The hashtag disrespectful prince was trending in 17 countries, with over 2 million posts and counting. Prince Khalil's Instagram followers were split down the middle, half defending him as a victim of American oversensitivity, half expressing genuine shock at his behavior. But it wasn't just social media noise anymore. CNN had picked up the story for their primetime broadcast. Fox News was running a segment titled, "Foreign Royal Disrespects American Heroes." International outlets from London to Tokyo were covering what they called the Arlington incident. The most damaging content came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, a Gold Star mother who had lost her Marine son in Iraq, posted a video response that went viral faster than the original incident. Through tears, she explained what the tomb of the unknown soldier meant to families like hers, families who would never know where their loved ones were buried. Prince Khalil was in his luxury hotel suite, scrolling through the comments with growing unease. His social media manager had gone silent after the story broke. His usual supporters seemed divided, and the negative responses were unlike anything he had ever experienced. That's when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his father's private number. "Return to the embassy immediately." King Fahad's voice was ice cold through the phone. There was no greeting, no explanation, just a command that carried the weight of absolute authority. The line went dead before Prince Khalil could respond. The drive to the embassy felt longer than usual. For the first time since the incident, Prince Khalil began to sense the true magnitude of what had occurred. His bodyguards, usually chatty during transport, remained completely silent. King Fahad was waiting in the embassy's secure communications room. On the large screen were news broadcasts from around the world, all featuring footage of his son's behavior at Arlington. The king's face was unreadable, but his silence was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. "Do you understand what you have done?" the king finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He gestured toward the screen showing international news coverage. "This is not about your social media games anymore." Prince Khalil started to offer his usual defense. "Father, it was just content for my followers. Americans are being too sensitive about—" "Stop!" The single word cut through the air like a blade. King Fahad pressed a button on the remote, and the screen changed to show the comment sections of various news articles. Thousands upon thousands of responses from military families, veterans, and ordinary Americans expressing their outrage. "Read them," the king commanded. "All of them." For the next hour, Prince Khalil was forced to read comment after comment from people whose lives had been touched by military service. Stories of sons and daughters who never came home, parents who buried empty coffins, wives who raised children alone. Each comment was like a dagger to his conscience. One comment stopped him cold. It was from Jennifer Thompson, Marcus's mother. "My son Marcus stands guard at that tomb because he believes in honoring those who gave everything for our freedom. Today, he showed more dignity in his silence than some people show in a lifetime." The prince's hands began to shake as he continued reading. These weren't political attacks or internet trolls. These were real people sharing real pain, and his actions had reopened wounds he never knew existed. King Fahad watched his son's face change as understanding finally dawned. "Power without wisdom is destruction, my son," he said quietly. "You were born into privilege, but you must earn respect through your actions." The king showed him the diplomatic cables that had been flooding in all evening. The American Secretary of State had called personally. Allied nations were expressing concern. Trade relationships worth billions of dollars were suddenly under scrutiny because of a 20-minute social media stunt. "But what do I do now?" Prince Khalil asked, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the confused young man he really was, rather than the confident influencer he pretended to be. King Fahad turned off the screens and looked directly at his son. "That is not for me to decide," he said. "You created this situation. You must find your own way to resolve it. Kill." The weight of those words settled over Prince Khalil like a blanket of lead. His father wasn't going to fix this for him. There would be no royal decree, no diplomatic intervention, no behind-the-scenes damage control. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, he would have to face the consequences of his actions alone. That night, Prince Khalil couldn't sleep. He kept scrolling through the responses to his Arlington posts, each one driving home the magnitude of his mistake. He began to understand that this wasn't about political correctness or cultural differences. This was about basic human respect for sacrifice and service. By dawn, he had made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. It was time to do something he had never done before in his life. It was time to take responsibility, without cameras, without publicity, without any expectation of applause. 2 days after the incident, Prince Khalil did something unprecedented. He deleted his controversial Instagram posts and published a formal apology that his publicists never saw before it went live. The statement was simple, direct, and came from a place his followers had never seen before: genuine remorse. "I deeply apologize for my disrespectful behavior at Arlington National Cemetery," he wrote. "I now understand that my actions dishonored the memory of countless heroes and caused pain to families who have sacrificed everything. I was wrong, and I am committed to learning from this mistake." But Prince Khalil knew that words alone would never be enough. Real redemption required real action, away from the cameras and the crowd. That afternoon, he made a call that surprised everyone who knew him. He contacted Arlington National Cemetery directly, speaking to the administrative office. No media, no publicity team, no diplomatic channels, Just a young man asking for permission to return and pay his respects properly. The next morning, as the cemetery opened to visitors, Prince Khalil arrived with only 2 bodyguards. He carried a simple wreath of white roses, purchased with his own money from a local florist. The inscription read, "In honor of the unknown, from someone learning to understand." Arlington was nearly empty at this early hour. The crisp morning air carried the weight of reverence that he had failed to feel during his first visit. This time, there were no cameras, no live streams, no audience to perform for. As he approached the tomb of the unknown soldier, Prince Khalil saw Specialist Marcus Thompson beginning his duty shift. The same young soldier he had mocked and disrespected just days earlier stood with the same unwavering dignity, maintaining his sacred watch. Prince Khalil placed the wreath carefully at the base of the tomb steps. He removed his sunglasses and stood in complete silence for 5 full minutes, his head bowed in genuine respect. For the first time, he truly understood what this place represented. Not just American sacrifice, but the universal cost of freedom. When he finally raised his head, he found that Marcus had completed his ceremonial walk and was now standing at attention. For just a moment, their eyes met across the sacred space. Prince Khalil nodded slightly, not the casual gesture of his previous visit, but a deep bow of acknowledgement and respect. Something extraordinary happened then. Marcus, while maintaining his rigid posture and forward gaze, allowed his eyes to shift almost imperceptibly. It lasted only a second, but it was unmistakable. A soldier's quiet acknowledgement of genuine respect finally offered. As Prince Khalil turned to leave, he noticed William Patterson, the Vietnam veteran from the crowd days earlier, walking slowly along a nearby path. The old soldier paused when he saw the prince, and for a moment, tension filled the air. Then Patterson did something unexpected. He gave Prince Khalil a single, solemn nod, not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that the young man was trying to do better. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Prince Khalil walked back to his car in complete silence. But something fundamental had changed. He had learned that true respect cannot be demanded or bought. It must be earned through actions, especially when no one is watching. Later that day, Marcus Thompson filed a brief addendum to his incident report. Subject returned voluntarily to pay respects appropriately. No further issues observed. The story might have ended there, forgotten in the endless cycle of social media controversies. But sometimes the most powerful transformations happen away from the cameras, in moments of genuine human connection and quiet redemption. Not every apology needs an audience. Sometimes the most meaningful changes occur in the silence between one heartbeat and the next, witnessed only by those who understand the true weight of honor.